Hello and welcome to the Secure Start podcast.
I write a lot about my belief that love saves lives. Every child deserves a safe, stable, loving home, and that our residential services need support to be able to do that. Children heal through relationships, and yet the compliance is the kind of ground on which we stand upon, but not necessarily in the way in which healing can be measured. When we talk to and engage with care experienced young people, what they tell us is important to them are those relationships, are those adults that showed up consistently, calmly, attuned again and again, those adults that took the time to notice and spend time and build strong relationships. That's really where safety is built and felt. As much as children need safe, stable, loving environments in order to thrive, actually so do adults. And if we think about homes and organisations as kind of organic structures, we need to be considering how not only do we provide safe, stable, loving homes, but how do we create safe, stable, loving organisations? How do we create an inspection framework, because it is necessary and helpful, that breeds love instead of fear? And we know that in order to create safe environments for children, adults need to feel psychologically safe and contained, and therefore the organisation needs to be the container. What we say is compliance is the foundation that we stand on, not the ceiling that we reach for. Fact is that we have legislated ourselves and we have safeguarded ourselves against actually being able to love children. And the truth is that when we are so afraid to love children, the outcome is that children grow up feeling unloved. But the real safeguarding is the relationship that child has with that adult every day, who looks after them, who has an understanding of their needs, has a awareness in their changes, in their mood, in their behaviour. And what that looks like love, and that looks like care. And fear cannot drive out fear. Only love can do that, really.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to the Secure Start podcast. I'm Colby Pearce, and joining me this episode is an inspirational voice in the UK residential care sector. Before we begin our conversation, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands that I come to you from, the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and acknowledge the continuing connection the living Kaurna people feel to land, waters, culture, and community. I'd also like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. My guest this episode is Carla Keyte. Carla is the founder and director of Lighthouse, bringing extensive expertise in quality, compliance, and safeguarding across the residential childcare sector in the UK. With a background spanning registered manager, head of care, and head of quality and compliance for an organisation operating over 30 homes rated good and outstanding, Carla has deep practical insight into operational leadership, regulatory compliance, and governance. Carla has a proven track record of resolving complex compliance issues and supporting organisations through challenging regulatory actions. Her specialism lies in developing and embedding quality and governance frameworks that drive sustainable improvements and ensure the highest standards of care. Passionate about love-led practice and the power of meaningful relationships, Carla champions approaches that create safe, nurturing, and stable environments where children and young people can truly thrive. Her expertise in implementing integrated therapeutic models enables her to support organisations to meet children's emotional, social, and developmental needs with compassion, structure, and intentionality. Carla founded Lighthouse to provide expert guidance and tailored support to providers navigating an increasingly complex regulatory landscape. Her mission is to empower teams to deliver values based, child centred practice that goes beyond compliance, creating homes that are safe, stable, and loving. The name Lighthouse reflects Carla's vision to act as a guiding beacon for organisations, illuminating the path through complexity towards excellence in care, safeguarding, and relational practice. Welcome, Carla.
Well, Colby, what an intro there. Thank you. And thank you for having me.
Yes, well, you're welcome. It is a good one. And what isn't in there, and I often ask people if there's anything that they'd like to add, but many people are just a little bit uh, overwhelmed by hearing their life's work read back to them. But I kind of discovered you, although I discovered you for myself, not in a talent identification way, but through your writing, and you write beautifully on a social media platform. They're not sponsoring me yet, so I won't mention LinkedIn. Oh, there you go. I did.
They should.
Yeah, so you write beautifully on there about the provision of care in residential children's home, and yeah, and so that's how I first, I guess, came across your work, and here you are on the podcast.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you. No, really, Colby. And I think for me, as somebody once said, the pen is mightier than the sword. And I do. I write a lot of poems and expression and emotion, and I write a lot about my belief that love saves lives, and that comes
Mm,
from my own personal experiences, but my experience of working in the residential sector and seeing how, the relationships that we form with children, with adults supporting them, and the network are able to really change children's lives and help to heal their trauma. And I think it's a very difficult time within the residential
mm,
sector. We talk a lot about policy, procedure, practice, regulation, Ofsted. All of these things are important, and no doubt we're going to discuss them today, Colby. But that forefront for me in summarizing everything that we are keen to talk about is empowering safe, stable, loving homes for children. We believe genuinely with our whole heart that every child deserves a safe, stable, loving home, and
mm.
that our residential services need support to be able to do that. And love takes a village to raise children, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just start with that. What do you see as being the role and purpose of children's residential homes? And have you noticed anything that's shifted over the period of time that you've been working in the sector?
hmm No, I have, and I think it's interesting because the core purpose of a children's home is actually beautifully very simple, and it is to provide a safe, stable, loving home for children that cannot live within their own families. I think what has shifted over the last 10 years is our understanding of what that really means. And so our Children's Homes Regulations 2015 are, still very valid when you look through the lens of what children need. But our understanding over time, 10 years ago, we talked about placements and behaviour management and risk reduction and contact. And now we talk about home and family time and adults who love and care for children. And so we, in the sector have really developed an understanding that children heal through relationships, and yet the compliance is the kind of ground on which we stand upon, but not necessarily in the way in which healing can be measured. We now know that kind of trauma lives in the body and that safety is a psychological experience that we develop through relationship, not necessarily just through kind of policy and procedure and tick box, and that healing is developed through emotionally attuned adults who are
Mm.
able to regulate with children and support them to make sense of their trauma. So I don't think that the purpose has changed. I think potentially that our clarity has, our knowledge
Mm.
has, our understanding of neuroscience and biology and how trauma shapes and contaminates experiences for the children
Mm.
that we look after.
Yeah, so I guess the as you say, the language and the degree of focus on that primary task or that purpose of children's homes has become clearer, more
Mm.
defined. And do you think that there's been a change in the experience of the young people who reside in residential homes associated with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And when we talk to and engage with care experienced young people, what they tell us is important to them are those relationships, are those
Mm.
adults that showed up consistently, calmly, attuned
Mm.
again and again, those adults that took the time to notice and spend time and build strong relationships. That's really where safety is built
Mm.
and felt actually in relationship.
It's interesting. I've had a number of guests talk about alumni as such of children's residential homes going back quite a number of, well, spread through the podcast episodes. And interestingly, what they report is that children who have been in residential homes generally, and even through specific ones that I've had people associated with them on the podcast, is that they generally give positive feedback about their experience, sometimes incredibly positive feedback about their experience in residential child homes that probably flies in the face a little bit of what policymakers think is in the best interest of children.
Mm. I think we can't be naive, Colby. The facts still show that a lot of children, high number of children who grew up in residential care or looked after are more likely to end up in prison than they
Mm.
are in university, and that is a sad fact. But I don't think it can take away from the impact of relationships. And what we hear consistently, time and time and time again, is one person who shows up unconditionally with positive regard for a child who builds relationships can help to heal that trauma and change the direction of a person's or a child's adult's life, actually, not just children. It's
Mm.
true for us as human beings in terms of our understanding and knowledge in relation to trauma-informed practice. Residential care often can be perceived as an institution or a last choice, or
Mm.
especially a lot in the media of money grabbing, or we've got a lot of concerns around profiteering. And, I can't take away again, even from those concerns, Colby, but what I see when I work across the sector is resilience and passion and people who care and turn up
Mm.
every day to work with some of society's most traumatized children. And what
Mm.
I also see is that the power of love and relationships can really shape and help children heal from
Mm.
traumatized experiences in their early years.
So when you visit a home, what do you see that really, I guess, um, encourages you or reassures you that this is a safe and stable, loving home for the children and young people who live there?
hmm It's primarily going to be about children's voice, isn't it? We talk a lot about beyond compliance. So, for example, if we consider what is good when we look at the Ofsted framework, how do we measure good currently? The SCIF, the Common Inspection Framework, really sets out what that looks like for a residential children's home. But how do we measure what is felt?
Mm,
How do we understand if children feel loved and safe and cared for? Because often the measurement isn't how many incidents we've had, but how we are supporting children through those feelings, through those experiences to manage and learn and grow from and through their trauma. So
mm,
what does good look like? What does it feel like? It feels safe. It feels emotionally safe. It feels like children who feel safe in their bodies enough to play and experience and grow and engage in the community. It feels like children who are able to build relationships with adults and adults who are creating environments that feel and reflect home, where children genuinely seen, felt, heard, loved, and cared for, and where adults are supported with the psychological safety and security to be able to do that in a professional and containing way for children.
mm. And I wonder whether the standards, the safeguarding standards that exist in relation to, or the regulatory standards that exist in relation to assessing children's homes. And we see a lot on LinkedIn, a lot about inspection outcomes. I guess I'm just wondering about what relationship you see between those inspection outcomes that come through the regulation system and process and the children's experience of the home. And is there a relationship between what the how homes are rated by Ofsted and the children's experience in those homes?
Yeah. And the truth is a lot of homes, a great number, most number of homes are rated Ofsted good, and
Mm,
I would consider that are delivering safe, stable, loving homes for children. The lens again in which we look at that trauma-informed approach, the relational measurement of care, I think is the aspect that needs to catch up. So
mm,
um, often in the other end of the inspection cycle requires improvement, inadequate compliance. That's not really particularly trauma-informed language. It's not
no.
the way in which we speak to each other or we talk when we're coaching and we're developing and we're supporting homes on that journey of understanding. Because as much as children need safe, stable, loving environments in order to thrive, actually so do adults. And if we think about homes and organizations as kind of organic structures, we need to be considering how not only do we provide safe, stable, loving homes, but how do we create safe, stable, loving organizations? How do we create an inspection framework? Because it is necessary and helpful
Mm,
that breeds love instead of fear. Because I think a
mm,
lot of the time, the sense of judgment and negative language and narrative that we have created creates this sense of fear. And we know that in order to create safe environments for children, adults need to feel psychologically safe
mm,
and contained, and therefore the organization needs to be the container
mm.
for that.
You know, you make a very good point. We would never, in trauma-informed work, we would never assess someone, a child, as being inadequate,
No.
as not
And I
meeting
think,
up to our standards.
yeah, And I've thought a lot about this. I think safe, stable, loving homes at Lighthouse is the lens in which we look at everything, whether that's a call for training or compliance support. Over the last 5 years, we've supported a number of organisations that have been inadequate in compliance, primarily around Regulation 12 and safeguarding and Regulation 13 leadership. And what we see is this sense of kind of blame and finger pointing and failure. And I think that it sits alongside sometimes often this narrative around residential care that, it's profiteering. But when
Mm,
we think about children in the family home or foster care and we have safeguarding concerns, what we do is we enact child protection procedures, reenact
mm,
safeguarding structures, reenact working together, multi-agency support and development for children and families and homes.
mhm,
But within the current inspection framework, we've become a much more enforcement aimed perspective. And some of that is absolutely necessary.
mm,
But I believe that in order to have a much more relational inspection process, we should be asking ourselves, is this a safe, stable, loving home for children?
mm, mm,
Or is this a home that requires support to be a safe, stable, loving home for children? And
mm,
I actually genuinely believe that Ofsted should be a safeguarding partner.
mhm,
And where homes are facing a challenge, then we should enact similar processes to child protection procedures where we have a team of specialists, the inspectors, the local authorities, leadership team, residential specialists, those with trauma-informed and therapeutic experience to help that home provide safe, stable, loving homes for
mm,
children, or to consider what needs to be done in order to develop that further. And, in some points that might be that children need different intervention and support, but overarchingly, when we have a clear common goal and we take away that blame language and we reframe it as safeguarding partnership, we keep children much more at the focus and adults who are
mm,
supporting them, who turn up every day with a
mm,
huge level of love and care and resilience, to be
mm,
able to provide children with safety, stability, and love in a regulated way.
mm. Yeah, they're all very interesting points, and in some ways it taps into one of the purposes I had, or one of the intentions I had in starting the podcast, which was to change the language about around children's residential childcare more generally. But I think also I have had long-standing concerns about the impact of how external bodies, whether they be a regulator, whether they be the media, the judiciary, or even the local child protection, statutory child protection authority. I've been concerned about the language that they is used
Yeah,
about the workforce that they're offering commentary, assessment,
yeah,
decision, judgment about. And in residential care, um, when I see a children's minister, for example, advertise on social media something along the lines of, um, our government has uh, established this new service, family-based care of children and young people that will save X number of children from residential care.
yeah.
And when I see that, it makes my blood boil, because I just think, whatever your views are about residential care, residential childcare, um, there are kids that are in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not and it is quite a heterogeneous group. There are always examples of not so good,
Yeah.
residential care homes.
Yeah.
And there are also examples of outstanding uh, home experiences for children. And I guess now I'm getting on my soapbox a little bit, but I think that
No.
if you've got the power to change, then because you do, and you've got concerns about our residential childcare sector, then do something about it. Um, but as just to finish my other point, which was that I'm always very concerned about the experience of the staff when they
Mm-hmm.
are aware
Mm-hmm.
of those direct messages that
Mm-hmm.
residential care is something to be avoided at all
Mm-hmm.
costs, that it
Mm-hmm.
is the option of last resort. And I think the cost at all costs, that cost has that double meaning because I think, it is perhaps more expensive in some ways than other forms of care. Um,
Yeah.
but so what? Raising children is expensive, and I think that whole language around it is the option of last resort really
Yeah.
cheats homes and children out of being resourced to the level that adequately, more than adequately, meets their needs.
Yeah. And our sector has become driven by that fear-based language and experience. So
Mm.
adults supporting children feel that there is a disconnect between, the love and care that we do, and then this understanding of it, it does cost to invest in effective trauma-informed care for children. We need huge amount of resources to be able to support children who have experienced significant trauma,
Mm.
relational rupture, exploitation at the hands of society. These are children who have been harmed and hurt, not what we often consider to be naughty children and beyond that, our children's homes have often been considered historically as kind of last resorts and institutions and places where, we're lacking love and support. And I think that's the key thing for me in all of those roles, in all of those aspects, in all of the policies, procedures, practice, in every Ofsted report I've read, in every policy we've built, every role. The thing that stands fundamentally at the core of it, Colby, that I have always been, is a love-led practitioner.
Yeah.
I
Children.
believe genuinely that love saves lives and children
Mm.
heal, and we can heal trauma and relational rupture and attachment disorder through building strong, safe relationships with children. And in order to do that, we need to have a framework that support us to boldly love children.
Mm. So what I'm taking from what you're saying is that um, the very things that support a felt sense of psychological safety, a felt sense of mattering, a felt sense of belonging.
Purpose.
But yeah, all of a felt sense of connection to others needs to be built into any assessment framework when one is from a regulatory point of view, um, turning one's mind to the safety
Yeah.
and well-being of children.
Yeah, absolutely. What does a safe, stable, loving home for this child look like? Because, we talk about regulation, but actually the truth is, God, we've got a number of children, foster homes, supported accommodation. We've got challenges with homes getting regulated. We've got children, more children now than we've ever had in unregulated care. So
Mm,
the question or the key question for me is this child experiencing a safe, stable, loving home? And if not, what do we need to do about it? Because, this kind of finger pointing and blame culture of the residential sector, the demonizing is not the truth. There are aspects of it that need to be controlled. But the truth is, when I travel across the sector in the 20 years I've worked in this arena, but more so in the last 5 years, where I've been supporting homes to embed safe, stable, loving homes model and to really consider what does that mean on a day-to-day. What I see is resilience and love and care and people who are passionate and who are genuinely able to make a difference to children's lives. And even the national agenda, things that are being said at a national level this week. I'm not going to involve myself in that debate so much, but they build on this rhetoric that the residential sector is broken and that we're, not doing and that we're costing, and but the cost of not loving children is that children grow up feeling not loved.
And
And the
then,
impact of that is so much wider
mm,
than, whether residential care should be the first choice for children or not.
yeah, from my perspective, it's about building social capital. It's building good social capital by
Yeah.
investing in good quality, high quality residential care, which already exists out there, and looking at
Yeah.
those providers that
Yeah.
provide excellent high quality care and how
Mm-hmm.
what we can understand about the way they work and the way they practice
Yeah.
and how that can be supported across the sector. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
it is. I always say when you improve the life of an individual child, you also improve the life of their life partner or life partners, their children and their grandchildren. That's the
Mm-hmm.
social the accumulating social
Mm.
capital effect of actually intervening therapeutically with our children. And another
Yeah.
thing that you said that I thought was really important and is we need, and I guess it was a post that you put on LinkedIn about understanding that has got drew my attention to your work, but is that what you just said just now about individualized care plans and assessing homes, perhaps supporting homes. An assessment can be therapeutic. I mean, if you're doing therapy, you're always assessed.
Yeah.
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 So,
Gonna have a
but
baseline.
that's right. An assessment is, in a therapeutic sense, is about where are we at and where do we want to get to.
Yeah.
Whereas an assessment in other contexts can be about deficit. What are the
Yeah.
deficits and how do we remediate those deficits? So if we want a system that is therapeutic, and we want that because um, people perform better in the role where they have a
Yeah.
regulatory system that is therapeutic. That
Yeah.
assess it and that system perhaps needs to assess the capacity of the home to meet the individual love and safety and belonging and mattering needs of the children. And I guess a point that has been brought up, and not to steal the floor too much, is what do you do with the most unhappy, the most traumatized, the most complex young people? If we have a system that has rigid standards as such that don't move with the individualized needs of children, then you'll create a certain category of children that become perhaps I'm struggling to think of a better word, but a liability or a threat to the standing of the home. And so we
Yeah.
never want a regulatory system that excludes certain children from care.
Yeah, and I think we have seen that a lot within the regulated sector. It's why we've got such a high number of children in unregulated or unregistered. We've got a number of delays in the registration process for Ofsted registered homes. But I think what it comes back to me for each time, Colby, is the same key question. What does a safe, stable, loving home look like for this child? And what do we need to do in order to achieve it. So often, we get calls from across the sector in the last 5 years, homes that have been inadequate compliance, children that are moving to and from unregulated care and needing those levels of support. And the first question that we ask, we use the Lighthouse lens and we say that actually, in reality, safety, safeguarding, the foundation of everything we do is built on a foundation of safeguarding. In our model, we say on the left-hand side, we have a triangle and it's quality and compliance, or really it equates to stable. And then we look at strategic intervention. What does that look like? What do we need to put in place? And often that's where our love-led practice comes in place. So safe, stable, loving homes for children. And if we think about Johnny, we say, what do we need to do to safeguard Johnny?
Mm.
What quality and compliance are we working within? What policy, procedure is Johnny in a regulated, unregulated home? What do we need to put in place to support that? What strategic intervention, what support or intervention, trauma-informed, therapeutic practice, love-led care, key work sessions, referral support for multi-agency services through effective assessment does little Johnny need? But we don't stop there. We have to then say, what about the adults? What do we need to do to safeguard out the adults that are looking after Johnny? How do we help them to do that in the most stabilising way in terms of quality and compliance? What interventions do we need to put in place for them through supervision and training, reflective practice that help us create a sense of psychological safety for adults? But again, Colby, we can't stop there. We have to say the home, and then wider, what we've been saying is, okay, as an organisation, what do you need to do to ensure safe, stable, loving homes for children? And we've been embedding this model in children's homes across the sector, and children's homes that have been under scrutiny through inspection, who are now long-standing, good and outstanding homes, not because they've learned to tick the inspection box and framework, but they've really considered their culture, their purpose. What does it mean to provide a safe, stable, individualized home for children, and to help adults to feel safe enough to love and care for those children on a daily basis?
There's clearly a role for leadership in that aspect of this conversation. But before I moved there, while I was listening to you speak, it occurred to me that some people know that I have a history of nearly 15 years working in the regulatory sector, the health practitioner regulation scheme here in Australia, in the psychology part of it. And sometimes in regulation, the standards can either be, broad principles, that we aspire to, or they can be quite prescriptive about the things that we want to see. And I think with the latter, if you look at the children that are cared for within residential child homes or children's homes, then a fairly prescriptive model or set of standards for regulation, I think, will certainly lack nuance. It's a very, very nuanced area potentially, but also I think about what the level, what is the level at which we pitch it? Do we is it pitched at the level of the bare minimum? This is the standard of care we expect everyone to be, and I don't want to draw this similarity, the relationship with Winnicott's idea of the good enough
Yeah,
parent, because I think his
yeah, it
idea of the good
is.
enough parent but this is a really good one
Mm,
in some expressions, in certain, for example, in assessing on an individualized basis, if you apply it
Yeah.
on an individualized basis. But if you have standards that try to, I'm trying to come up with language that isn't, and so I'm going to say it, lowest common denominator in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think for me, what we say is compliance is the foundation that we stand on, not the ceiling that we reach for. And
Yeah.
so it's beyond compliance. We do need a set of regulations. We do need standards. We still need a set of guidance. The way in which we look at that and, how it's framed, I think, needs to be more relational,
Mm,
and really considering what does that look like for individual children? Is this a service that's providing a safe, stable, loving home for children? Or, in the same way as families, do they need support to be able to
mm,
do so? And I think that frames that much more in terms of our kind of trauma-informed support language
mm,
assessment. You can't have a one size fits all necessarily. But what you can have is a commitment, a promise. And
mm,
actually, we can see that, if we look at Scotland, Scotland have the national promise. And I think the thing that I could say to you, Colby, in my whole career that I am most proud of is that I am currently the lead for the Love and Care Network in
mm,
partnership with our colleagues over at Children's Homes Quality, and we are working to build a village to really communicate the power of loving relationships in children's homes, to create the framework and the training and the modules so that we can stand loud and proud and say, actually, our children are loved, the evidence base is here for it, the neuroscience supports it, the practice, the research in practice, attachment theory, whether we look at all of the layers of our evidence of care over the last 15 years since the children's homes regulations were embedded, show us that children can thrive and do thrive in homes where they feel safe, supported, loved, and cared for. And we need to be able to provide the framework that supports individual homes for individual children at a time in which they need it.
yeah. The promise is somewhat paradigm shifting, I think, in the sense that, and I think we've kind of moved a little bit around this topic, but um, the idea of loving the children in your care has
Yeah,
been polluted in a sense by concerns around what do professional boundaries look like.
yeah,
and and
absolutely. And
and if you so that's a really good example of where a safeguarding standard actually contributes to a poorer outcome for children and young
hmm
people.
hmm
It's that the law of unintended consequences in a sense. No good deed
hmm
goes unpunished. We keep a professional distance. We maintain boundaries, and then what are the consequences of doing that for our
hmm
children in terms of their experience of whether they matter, whether they're loved, what the promise Scotland really um, restores for us is our ability to actually say that the children need love, and that's
yeah,
part of our role. That is, but
yeah,
that's not a boundary transgression.
hmm
That's not even it's not even um, poor practice. It's a fundamental human need.
yeah.
And if we can't provide that, then what are we doing? What are we here for?
Yeah, yeah. And the neuroscience supports this. And the fact is that we have legislated ourselves and we have safeguarded ourselves against actually being able to love children.
Mm.
And the truth is that when we are so afraid to love children, the outcome is that children grow up feeling
Mm.
unloved, funnily enough. Um, it's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of these policies, this is the line, I think, between safeguarding and love. And I think what I've come to the conclusion of in all my research and thinking, Colby, is that the most purest form of safeguarding is love.
Mm.
Children need to feel safe, they need to feel regulated, they need adults that are going to hold boundaries, hold them in mind, and be able to, hold some of those experiences that they have been through. When we safeguard against that, when we think about compliance and safeguarding practice, we think about, have you filled out the safeguarding form? Have you informed Ofsted? Have you done a Reg 40? We think about safeguarding compliance, policy,
Mm.
procedure, practice. But the truth is, none of those things actually keep the child any safer.
Mm.
They inform people of the safeguarding need, they put a network around, and of course, those things are very important. But the real safeguarding is the relationship that that child has with
Mm.
that adult every day who looks after them, who has an understanding of their needs, has a awareness in their changes, in their mood, in their behavior. And what that looks like love, and that looks like care. And fear cannot drive out fear.
Mm.
Only love can do that, really.
Yeah, well, I think that's a very well made point. And my mind, where my mind is going, on the basis of what you're saying, is if we assess for performance, if that's what that's a bit like those two different types of assessment that I was
Yeah,
referring to earlier. One is the assessment of performance and capacity and ability to perform in a certain task or role. The other is
yeah.
about um, assessing a person's circumstances or an organisation's circumstances and turning our minds to where what do we implement, how do we support, what is the intervention
The
to
intervention.
and the therapeutic intervention, and
Mm,
that's a different type of safeguarding,
mm-hmm.
one and I see this is really relevant across safeguarding because of children, because people are talking about this in terms of how child protection
Yes.
systems should function. That,
Yes.
so a lot of the time, the way they function is that a family is in deep trouble, and they assess them to be in deep trouble, and the children
Mm-hmm.
are unsafe, and they remove those children. Yeah,
Yeah.
but the dialogue, part of the problem with that is then we also know that governments and their agencies struggle to provide the care that children need, that
Yeah.
and they will always struggle, I would say. There's nothing that
Mm-hmm.
they
Mm-hmm.
cannot replace the birth family connection
Yeah.
by and large. So they'll
Yeah.
always struggle with that. And what's coming into the more and more, I'm seeing it um, in terms of what people are saying about our child protection systems more broadly, is that the intervention should be more a therapeutic one. Yes, we assess the lay of the land as we find it, and rather than making a judgment at that point in relation to a line, what we say is what are the therapeutic interventions here
Yes.
that
Yeah.
get this family, that get this foster care placement, that where there's been a care concern, that get this children's home to a place. And this is the important thing, is if that's a philosophy that underpins our regulatory or our child protection system, then um, it naturally follows that we're looking for strengths to build on. but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
we're understanding the circumstances here, not from a point of view of judgment and decision making, but from a point of view of how do we address those
Mm.
circumstances therapeutically.
Yeah. And I think in a lot of ways that's the same foundation and model that we and lens that we've built at Lighthouse. And now I remember a very old boss of mine, she said to me, Carla, she said, you're fantastic at safeguarding children. I was a residential manager. When the kids are in your care, they're really safe. I'm working with high risk young ladies at high risk of exploitation. And she said, it's like you're running around the country with a cage and you catch these kids, and when they're in your cage, they're safe. But what happens
Mm,
when you lift up the cage and then you start to consider, okay, a lot of people work really hard to safeguard children. We've got Johnny, he's safe.
mm,
We've done the quality and compliance. We've told Ofsted, we've sold to the social worker, we've told the people, we've followed the procedure. But what are we going to do? What's the intervention? What's the strategic intervention that little Johnny needs? Is that, stronger key working, attuned adults? Is it, referral pathway, mental health support? Is it that he needs education, different care planning aspects? But then not only what intervention does little Johnny need, what intervention do the adults need to be
mm,
able to provide a safe, stable, loving home, to be emotionally and psychologically contained and safe to do so. So the two things can't be separate. We used to teach our adults, and there is a contrary to it in our safeguarding policies, in our professional boundaries. Leave yourself at the door.
mm,
Don't be behind a closed door with a child. Don't hug a child. God forbid you tell them that you love them or that you care for them, or you might buy them a small gift when you go on holiday.
mm,
And all of these safeguarding policies and procedures, Colby, they were built to safeguard our children from predators through the last 15 years, where we've seen, serious and significant child protection cases in our media across our country, across the world, across our sector. Failure upon failure is, if you would have it to believe that way. But we've created all of these policies that do safeguard children, but
mm,
inadvertently, they safeguard them from being loved and supported, because 15-year-old boys aren't sitting in the living room in front of numerous adults talking about their feelings and crying in their trauma. And they're crying at 3 o'clock in the morning in their bedroom with an adult who's taken the time to
mm,
build a relationship. And the door probably is going to be closed, and you probably are going to be sat on the bedroom floor crying and feeling and experiencing. And once upon a time, we were told, don't bring the emotion. That's not
mm,
effective safeguarding. But children need adults that show up for them, that care for them, that love them, that hold them in mind, that build trust and build a sense of safety, not just in tick boxes, not just on paper. The poem that you read, I think, you know, we don't require improvement. We require understanding. Understanding that children have experienced trauma, understanding that adults holding that is messy,
mm,
understanding that leaders need an incredible amount of resilience, and yet often we fail to understand the trauma, the need for love, the investment that takes to show up every day. It's one of the most
mm,
difficult jobs that I have ever done, and have never been so proud to stand here today in that
mm,
capacity as my lead for loving care. I've been an effective
mm,
safeguarding practitioner. I've driven changes in quality and compliance and Ofsted inspection. The regulatory framework is important, but at the heart of it all, if we don't keep the love, if we don't reclaim it, if we don't say it out loud, it's there in our regulatory framework. And coming all the way back round, Colby, we talked about the promise in Scotland. I believe that we should go one step further, and I call on, the UK government to invest in every child having a safe, stable, loving home, whether those children are in foster care, whether those children are unaccompanied asylum seekers, children living in residential homes or supported accommodation. And I urge our government to go one step further and say care doesn't stop at 16 or 18. Children, we talk about transitions and independence, but actually the reality is children, adults, human beings need sustaining, loving relationships. And one person who loves you unconditionally can build resilience, can shape your future, and can help children overcome the trauma that they have experienced so that they can go on to live, really fulfilling
Mm.
lives and to break that aspect of, as we talked about earlier, intergenerational trauma. It's a big thing, that, Colby.
Yeah, yeah. So, Carla, it has been a real pleasure, joy to have you on the podcast and discuss these matters with you. Is there any final thoughts that you would like to leave our listeners or watchers with?
Yeah, I think that's it. If there's one real message from this conversation, I hope it's this, Colby, because children don't heal in systems. They heal in safe, stable, loving homes, held by adults and leadership that feel safe enough to stay open and steady enough to kind of stay present through these experiences,
Mm.
through the difficult times and to stand with them. So I think, we don't need harsher systems. We actually need a more understanding one. We don't require improvement. We require understanding because when we build homes where love is protected, we have clear evidence that love saves lives.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank
Thank
you.
you very much, Carla. And yeah, thank you for coming on the pod.
Lovely. Thank you, Colby.